Picture this. You're in paradise. Literally, a perfect garden, everything's beautiful, you've got everything you need. And there's only one rule. Just one. Simple, right?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? When everything is absolutely perfect, how does it all fall apart? Well, turns out it all starts with a little conversation and a very persuasive, very sneaky character. All right, let's meet our troublemaker, the serpent. Now, the story says this guy was more cunning than any other animal around. And he doesn't waste any time. He goes right up to the woman Eve with a plan already bubbling away. So check out the serpent's opening move. It's brilliant in a sneaky way. He starts with a question that just slightly twists what God actually said. God's rule was they could eat from any tree except one. But the serpent phrases it like, did God really say you can't eat from any tree? See? It makes God sound super strict and unreasonable. He's just planting that first tiny little seed of doubt. And here it is, the main event. After Eve corrects him, the serpent lays it all on the table. First, he totally contradicts God. You're not going to die, he says. Then he drops the bombshell. He claims God has a secret motive. He's not trying to protect you, he's holding you back. He says God knows if you eat this, you'll be just like him. You'll know good and evil. I mean, wow, who could resist his sales pitch like that? So the seed of doubt has been planted, and the temptation is just hanging there. Eve is now staring at this tree, but she's seeing it in a whole new way, with the serpent's words just bouncing around in her head. And you can almost hear her thinking it through. 1, it looks tasty, so that's a plus. 2, it's pretty, nice to look at. And 3, this is the big one, it's desirable for gaining wisdom. The serpent's pitch worked like a charm. She takes a bite, and then gives some to her husband, Adam, who's right there with her. And yep, he eats it too. So, was there like a big flash of light, thunder and lightning? What does it actually feel like to suddenly become like God? Well, something happened right away, but it was definitely not what they were expecting. So what does this whole knowing good and evil thing even mean? Well, think of it like this. Before, their world was just innocent. They didn't have to deal with feelings like shame or fear or embarrassment. But the moment they ate the fruit, bam, a switch flips, and their minds are just flooded with all these new, super complicated and pretty awful feelings that they've never had to deal with before. That's the kind of knowledge they got. And here's the first shocking result of that new knowledge. Their eyes were opened, and the very first thing they realized was, whoa, we're naked. Something that was totally normal and natural a minute ago is now all of a sudden a huge source of shame. Their entire view of themselves just got turned upside down. What happens next is just pure panic mode. They hear God walking in the garden, a sound that was probably comforting before, but now it fills them with this brand new feeling, fear. So what do? They hide. And in a desperate scramble to deal with this new shame, they start trying to sew fig leaves together for clothes. It's just this clumsy, panicked reaction to a world that suddenly got very, very complicated. But you know, you can't exactly hide from God in a garden that He made. The confrontation was bound to happen, and it leads to probably the most famous blame game in all of history. So God asks Adam a pretty simple question. Did you eat from that tree? And Adam's answer is an absolute masterpiece of not taking responsibility. He doesn't just blame Eve. Listen to how he says it. The woman you put here with me. Oh my gosh. Do you see what he did? He's not just pointing a finger at Eve. He's sorta blaming God for putting her there in the first place. That's a bold move. Okay, so now it's Eve's turn. God asks her, what did you do? And does she own up to it? Nope. The buck gets passed right along. She points straight at the serpent and says he tricked her. And there you have it. The chain of blame is complete. Adam blames Eve and God, and Eve blames the serpent. Nobody's taking the heat. And this is a really big deal. Their one act of disobedience immediately leads to another problem, a total breakdown of honesty. The perfect trust they had with each other and with God is just shattered. Instead of facing the music, they just turn on each other.
But pointing fingers isn't going to get them out of this one. Choices have consequences, and now it's judgment time. God goes down the line, the serpent, the woman, and the man, and lays out their new reality.
And these aren't just random punishments. They're very specific, tailor-made for each of them. So let's break it down, starting with the one who got this whole mess started.
For the serpent, the punishment is physical. This animal, who is the cleverest of them all, is now cursed. He's going to crawl on his belly and eat dust for the rest of his life. Can you imagine? It's a complete flip, from the smartest beast in the garden to the lowliest crawler on the ground.
But then there's this other part of the serpent's curse, and it's way more mysterious. God says there's going to be this permanent hostility, this ongoing beef between the serpent and the woman, and between their descendants. It sounds a lot like a cryptic prophecy, right? Like it's setting the stage for a long, long battle between humanity and deception itself.
Now for Eve, her consequences hit right at the heart of life and relationships. She'll have pain in childbirth, and her relationship with her husband is now going to have conflict. And for Adam, his punishment is all about work. The ground itself is now cursed because of him. Gone are the easy days in the garden. From now on, getting food means back-breaking labor, fighting against thorns and thistles just to survive.
And yet, right in the middle of all this bad news, there's this really interesting moment. Adam names his wife Eve, which means living. Why? Because even though they're now facing a future that isn't permanent, he recognizes that she's going to be the mother of every person who ever comes after them. It's a little flicker of hope.
And here's another fascinating detail. Remember their flimsy little fig leaf outfits? Well, they weren't going to cut it. So God himself actually makes them better, more durable clothes out of animal skins. It's this final act of taking care of them, even as he's about to kick them out. He's judging their actions, for sure, but he hasn't totally abandoned them.
And then, it's over. They're sent out of the garden and the gate is locked behind them. They step into a world that is completely different. The easy harmony they knew is gone, and now it's replaced by struggle and a world that seems kind of hostile. They're officially on their own.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway? Why do we still talk about this story about a garden, a snake, and some fruit thousands of years later?
Well, I think it boils down to a few key things. First, it shows how one single choice, one act of disobedience, can have these massive ripple effects that change everything. Second, it's a powerful story about how deception and blame just absolutely wreck trust, not just with some higher power, but between people too. And finally, it's a reminder that our actions, our choices, they literally shape the world we live in. They can turn a paradise into a wilderness. And that really makes you think, doesn't it? How are the choices we're making right now shaping our world?